Good to see everyone tonight. I'm Alex Converse from Google. I work on the WebM VP9 video codec team. I've been doing that for about 3 years now. And before that, I did some stuff for YouTube. I used to work on this open source package that maybe some of you have used called FFmpeg. But anyway, I'm here to give kind of an overview of what's new with VP9. So VP9 is part of the WebM project, and sometimes people don't quite understand, like, what's the difference between WebM and VP8 and VP9. And so the WebM project is a project where the goal is to develop a high-quality, open video format for the web that's freely available for everybody to use. The WebM project includes the WebM container format, and it includes 2 video codecs, VP8 and VP9. We also collaborate closely with the WebP image format team. They have some really cool stuff that I recommend you check out, but I'm not going to be talking about their stuff tonight. So we first released VP9 summer of 2013 timeframe, approximately. We announced it at Google I/O in May, and then it launched in Chrome Stable in September, and that was 3 years ago. And we've been continuing to improve the VP9 codec in a backwards compatible way that still works with the 2013 version that was released. We have added a couple non-backwards compatible extensions for 10-bit and 12-bit content, and for 422 and 444 high color formats. We focused a lot on trying to make VP9 work really well, not just for video on demand, but have a solution for real-time live streaming too, and make the software decoder as fast as possible and work really well even on super low-end devices. So one big thing we did was we finally this year published a formal Bitstream specification. Here is sort of an example of one of our syntax tables where you see the name of the symbol and how many bits and what kind of bits to read, and there's a textual description elsewhere in there. It goes down to all the boilerplate. Like, I saw this one symbol in the spec that was like this horizontal line with a vertical line on top, and I'm like, I know I've seen that symbol before. So I look in like the terms that are used, and it means addition, apparently. I remember that from school. So we also have a set of levels defined now, where levels are sort of they're a concept that other codecs have. It's sort of the complexity of the video, so that if you have like an embedded decoder or something that can't handle, your 4K 60 FPS stuff, it can say what it can handle in terms of compression ratio and the distance between our super high quality alt-ref frames and that kind of thing. So this is super great if you want to make a VP9 stream that you want to serve to a 4K TV or any other hardware decoder. In April of 2015, last year, we finally introduced multithreading support. And in November of last year, we made VP9 the default codec in our software library. Our library supports both VP8 and VP9, and we had a bunch of speed improvements. In version 1.6, we really focused on decode speed and on real-time encode and real-time quality. So we have some new transport options for VP9. I said before we're part of the WebM project, and there's this WebM container, which is a really great container, and we're continuing to invest in it. We have a new C++11 WebM parser written from the ground up that adheres to the spec much more closely than the old parser, and it's just much better quality code. We have ISO BMFF MP4 bindings for VP9. So if you have a system that can already segment and write dash manifests and stuff for MP4, you can use VP9 with that. And we want you to use our codec in whatever stack, whatever ecosystem and other technologies we use. We even have some code to help you put VP9 in transport stream if you're super into that. So the outside VP9 ecosystem has also been expanding. Microsoft added support for VP9 and for the Opus audio codec to the latest version of their new browser, the replacement for Internet Explorer called Edge. And it's part of the Windows 10 anniversary update. VP9 in WebRTC became available in Chrome 48 in January for both desktop and Android. And in addition to these new players that we're super happy to be dealing with, we also still have over 1 billion endpoints from our longtime promoters, Chrome, Firefox, Android, and Opera. So you can serve VP9 a lot of places. There's also a lot of 4K TVs that support VP9. So I mentioned we have some decode improvements. So one big thing is that the supplemental SSE3 instructions, some of them are super slow on Intel's mobile chips. Like pshuffb, it basically lets you rearrange all the bytes in your super wide vector. And it takes 5 cycles on Silvermont, which is one of the older Atom chipsets. I don't know what the CPU is doing. I assume it's like looking for the answer in Ulysses or something. So we basically have tried to eliminate pshuffb from anything called in the decoder. A lot of stuff where it seems to be useful, you can get away with SSE2 that runs just as fast. And while Celeron and Atom and sort of the super low-end chips benefited the most, even Core i5 improved between 5 to 10% between our latest release cycle. And some of the improvements also just came from general code quality refactoring sort of things. Like if you don't make a bunch of extra copies of stuff and ship them around, you can save time. Who would have guessed? So here's an actual graph of decode performance on a Haswell Celeron. And we started out, it's indexed by git hash rather than date, which is a little bit hard to read. But it starts out April 1st, 2015, and goes to June of this year. And it goes from 105 average FPFs to over 130. And on Silvermont, which is lower end, you're going from high 60s to 100 FPS. So we're pretty happy with those results. There's this meme going around that VP9 is super intensive to decode in software, but it's actually a very low complexity codec. So on the encoder side, we've improved rate control quite a bit. We have much tighter rate control in VBR mode, and we have parameters that allow you to specify how aggressively you should try to hit your target for the clip versus for the corpus as a whole. Some people are interested in sort of their total bandwidth egress, and as long as you're not straying super far from the target where any particular clip weighs in, doesn't really matter. Other people are definitely know exactly how much bandwidth they have and want to stay tightly near that, but not undershoot or definitely not overshoot and get rebuffers, so you can have tighter rate control if you want it. We've improved quality and bit allocation, especially for animated content, graphics, low contrast, low brightness sort of content. And we have a bunch of sort of miscellaneous bug fixes to the rate control that added up help get pretty good gains. We prevent having sort of very short alt-ref groups. The alt-ref is sort of a high-quality, non-shown frame that VP9 likes to put in your Bitstream. And a lot of frames can refer back to that high-quality frame. But if you put a high-quality frame where you don't have very many bits left until the next keyframe, that's just sort of wasted. So we're spacing those better in the video. We fixed 2-pass accounting for motion in large formats like 4K, where things would just overflow, and various issues with high bit depth, where we're just going through and making sure there aren't any overflows and fixing sort of weird corner cases that don't pop up in 8-bit, which is where most of the content is normally served. So we have Trellis Quantization turned back on, and what this allows us to do is lower some quantized coefficients. So if you're not familiar with it, a typical video codec will divide the video into blocks and do some sort of transform, like the DCT, on those blocks, and take the answers from the DCT, those DCT coefficient that it spits out, and quantize them, which in our case is just a fancy word for rounding. So we're taking these quantized DCT coefficients and we're saying, what if we just lower some of these a little bit to try to avoid having to send them? How much would that make the video look worse versus how much are we saving? So we can sort of set up this trellis to do this. And so we have this graph where we start at the end and work our way all the way backwards to the beginning. And if you can only move sort of leftward in the graph, how many ways are there to traverse this? Audience participation. It's not a trick question. So if you sort of start at that fork and go left till you hit one of the ends, and you can only move leftward. Yeah, 2 to the 6, exactly. So there's 2 to the 6 unique paths through this graph. So, and this is just simplified. We have blocks, we have transform sizes that go up to 32 by 32, which is 1024. So there's 2 to the 1024 paths through one of those trellises, which obviously isn't tractable. So how many nodes do you think you actually need to visit to figure out what the best way through is? Any guesses? That's pretty good. You need to visit each slot once, and you need to visit both in each slot, so 12. And there's this dynamic programming technique called a Viterbi algorithm, which basically it's a fancy way for saying that if you don't have negative weights in your graph and you know the fastest way from A to C, and it includes B, you automatically already know the fastest way from A to B and from B to C. So we've done this to help squeeze a lot of extra rate out of the videos at our highest efficiency settings. So we've also, at our highest compression settings, have shifted the distortion calculation, that's sort of our error, back from the transform domain to the pixel domain. There's this idea in signal processing called Parsivals Theorem, and it basically just says, you can measure the energy in the Fourier or the DCT domain, and it's the exact same as measuring it in the spatial or time domain. So for our to save a bunch of encoding time, what we do is we basically subtract our transform coefficients that we initially calculated from our dequantized coefficients. But doing that doesn't take into account rounding done in the inverse transform, and it doesn't take into account clipping that's done to get the pixels back into a valid range if you're ringing so far that you're undershooting 0 or overshooting 255. So we found some reasonable gains just switching to this, which we do everywhere at our highest efficiency settings, and now we're also looking at applying it selectively at lower compression settings where, in cases where we think it would help the most. Another thing we've started doing, another Parsival-like assumption that doesn't really hold all the time, is we're doing a properly cropped distortion. So when we're calculating the distortion, our VP9 uses 64 by 64 prediction blocks. So unfortunately, a lot of common video sizes don't divide evenly by 64. 144p is this example here. 64 does not divide into that. But 64 doesn't divide evenly into 720. It certainly doesn't divide evenly into 1080. So you have all these sort of super carved up blocks at the bottom. One problem is that when the encoder is trying to evaluate what the best way to predict a block is, it says, all right, I have some really good matches in this block, but it falls apart because all of these sort of the checkerboard pixels that are outside the image, they don't line up. But no one ever sees those pixels. So it's not important to reconstruct them accurately. So what we've done is, for these blocks, we use the pixel domain distortion, and then we crop it to only the visible area. And that allows us to use really big, really high-efficiency blocks on the edges. And this can have big gains, especially at low resolutions where a full third of your 64 by 64s at 144p fall along this edge. We also have a bunch of sort of miscellaneous improvements. We've increased the resolution in the way we're tracking how bits are spent. VP9 has this sort of arithmetic bool coder where you can spend fractions of bits. So it's important to have enough resolution to see what's really going on. What was happening was our least likely and our second least likely, one of them cost like 1.4 times 2 to the minus 8 bits, and one of them cost 2.8 times like 2 to the minus 8 bits. And what was going on was when we were rounding them to units of 2 to the minus 8, they were rounding to 3 and 1. The cost ratio was coming up as 3 to 1, but it's really 2 to 1. So by improving that resolution, the encoder can say, doing things this way only really costs twice as much, not 3 times as much. We fixed a ton of unsigned integer overflows. We added more unit tests for our transforms and things like that, and run all of our unit tests, all of our integration tests with the integer sanitizer from John Rieger that's part of LLVM and maybe part of GCC. And we found a lot of cases where this block, it was getting worse and worse and worse and worse, and then we overflowed. Hey, this block looks pretty good. So that was a problem. In cases of dropping the high bits in distortion were also a problem. We've started using a sharper filter to generate these alt-ref frames, which has shown improvements in both visual quality and compression performance. In the real-time encoder, we've added optional screen content tuning that helps reconstruct flat areas and helps reconstruct the types of patterns you see in sort of screen sharing material. For our best quality settings, speed 0, we call it, we have a pretty substantial encoding speed up there. VP9 is completely open source. You can monitor our progress on WebM Discuss and on Codec Development. It's open source code. You can go to webmproject.org/code and find out where our Git repository is. You can ask questions in real time on our IRC channel on Freenode. Any questions? I know there has been development on both hardware encoders and decoders. I know that, for instance, Edge on Windows 10 will only play if there's a hardware decoder, at least if it's on battery. I know there's also hardware encoders in various stages of progress, but I'm not sure where they stand in the marketplace, so I don't want to be wrong. So there's this new codec development coming out of Netflix and Cisco and Mozilla and Google and Microsoft and Amazon and a few other companies as part of the Alliance for Open Media, AV1. And right now, AV1's install base is 0, and there's a lot of VP9, and there's people serving VP9 that don't want to shut off VP9. So as long as they're still continuing to transcode and serve VP9 to VP9 customers, we're going to keep trying to improve libVPX. As far as VP9 stuff folding into AV1, we've had improvements that we've made to the VP9 encoder feed forward into AV1. We've also had a lot of things that we've learned investigating VP1 feed backwards into VP9. Like the Trellis work came out of AV1. There was a Trellis in VP9 that was turned off that was pretty slow. We made it a lot faster for AV1, and then we ported it to VP9. The stuff about the better rate accounting was based off some work that I was doing for AV1 that I said, hey, we can also apply this to VP9. So there's definitely ideas to make a fast encoder going both ways. Yeah, so with VP9, depending on whose benchmarks and things you're looking at, you're looking at somewhere between 40 to 45% smaller for a given file size. Some people shipping VP9 have also decided to take a chunk of that gain, maybe only go like 30% smaller, and also have a small quality bump as well. So there's a lot of overlap in the ecosystem with the most popular tools. FFmpeg has supported encoding VP9 through libVPX for a long time. And now that you have ISO BMFF chunking, you don't have to worry about creating a backend for WebM the rest of the way through. Some of the transcoding services now have launched support for VP9. I believe Encoder recently launched VP9 support if you're using a third-party service. There's some sort of guidelines on getting started on the WebM project website that I could point people to. So I mean, for encoders out there, VP9, on the encoder side, it definitely is higher complexity than 264. Things you can do to get around that are try to look at your corpus and start with your most popular videos for VP9. That's what YouTube did. At first, they were only encoding the very popular videos with VP9, and as they saw the bandwidth savings, they sort of started working their way out with lower priority jobs for less popular stuff. You know, when H.264 first launched, people thought it was intractably slow, and given enough time, the encoder's gotten substantially faster than when it first launched, and it's continuing to get faster. I think a couple of them are things that we've shown a lot of progress on lately. One of them is endpoint support. We finally have Microsoft on board. One of them is encode time. We finally hardware encode solutions are finally starting to wrap up, and that should also be another way to save on encode time, where maybe the hardware solution will be more CPU, or not CPU, I guess, more power friendly than the software solution. Another thing that people have complained about before is decode battery, and we've done a bunch of decode work. So I think VP9 is in a really good place to sort of overcoming those hurdles. There were ecosystem things, but now we have BMFF support and support from the transcoding services, so that's really great. So I think it's a good place to move forward for VP9.